Rain hammered the neon streets of Seoul hard enough to blur the city into streaks of red and gold. Isabella Vale stumbled barefoot through the back corridor of Club Eclipse, one hand pressed against the blood, soaking through her blouse, the other clutching her phone so tightly her fingers had gone numb. Behind her, men were shouting, not laughing. That was worse. "You think you can run from us?" One of them yelled, his voice bouncing off the damp concrete walls. Her lungs burned. Her vision shook. She crashed through the steel kitchen door into the service hallway behind the restaurant section and nearly collapsed against the wall. Music pounded somewhere above her like a second heartbeat. Expensive people drank champagne upstairs while downstairs a terrified woman tried not to die. Then footsteps approached from the shadows ahead, slow, measured, not rushed at all. The men chasing her noticed too. Their laughter stopped like someone had flipped a switch. A tall Korean man stepped into the dim emergency lighting, wearing an immaculate black suit. No umbrella despite the rain dripping from his shoulders. Water traced lines down his sharp cheekbones. 4 bodyguards spread behind him with military precision. The entire hallway changed temperature the moment he appeared. Isabella didn't know his name yet, but the men chasing her did. Their confidence vanished instantly. One of them swallowed hard enough that she could hear it from 20 feet away. "Boss, we didn't know she ran in here." The man's dark eyes shifted toward Isabella. Blood stained her sleeve. Bruises darkened her throat. Fingerprints pressed into her skin like stamps. Terror sat naked in her expression, no matter how hard she tried to hide it. Her blouse was torn at the shoulder where someone had grabbed her. The stranger studied her for exactly 3 seconds. Then he spoke. "Bring her to me." Words landed softly, deadly softly, and suddenly 6 armed men looked afraid. Before we find out what happens next, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this take days to write, but your support makes it all worth it. Now back to the story. 2 of the bodyguards moved toward her. Isabella flinched backward, her bare feet slipping on the wet floor. But their hands were surprisingly gentle when they caught her elbows, steadying her instead of restraining her. "Easy," one murmured. "You're safe now." Safe, the word felt foreign. The tall man, clearly someone important, someone terrifying, turned his attention to the men who had been chasing her. His expression didn't change. That was the frightening part. No anger, no threats. Just absolute calm, like a surgeon examining a wound before deciding where to cut. "You threatened a woman inside my establishment," he said quietly. His voice carried the weight of someone who never needed to raise it. "And now you're lying to me inside my establishment." The leader of her pursuers stepped forward, hands raised slightly. "Boss, this woman stole sensitive information. She's interfering with business." "We were just information." The question was simple, direct, the kind of question that demanded an answer. The man hesitated, his mouth opened and closed twice. A tiny mistake, a deadly mistake. The tall man noticed instantly. Isabella watched the realization dawn across her attacker's face. He had just revealed that there was no information, no theft, no justification for what they'd done to her. The tall man stepped closer until the other man looked physically smaller, despite being surrounded by armed companions. He wasn't particularly bulky or threatening in build, but presence had nothing to do with muscle. This was the presence of someone who had learned violence young and worn it like a second skin ever since. "Did you touch her?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Her attacker said nothing. His silence was confession enough. Isabella saw the answer settle across the stranger's face like winter ice. Not rage. Rage would have been human. This was something colder, more controlled. The kind of anger that had learned patience years ago, that could wait months or years for the right moment. The tall man removed his suit jacket slowly, deliberately, and handed it to one of his guards. "Take Miss Vale upstairs. Bring a doctor. Double security at her brother's facility immediately." Isabella stared at him in shock. Her heart stuttered. "How do you know my—" "I know everything that happens under my roof," he interrupted. But his voice wasn't harsh. It was almost gentle, the way you'd speak to a frightened animal. Then finally, for the first time, his eyes softened slightly as they met hers. They were deep brown, almost black in the dim light, and they held something she hadn't expected to see in a man like him. Recognition, understanding. like her terror had touched an old wound inside him. "You're safe now." Nobody had said those words to Isabella in years. Not since her parents died, not since Noah's accident. Not since she'd become invisible, a ghost serving drinks to men who never remembered her face. And somehow, coming from the most dangerous man in Seoul, she believed them instantly. As the guards guided her toward the private elevator, one of them draped the boss's jacket over her shoulders. It smelled like rain and sandalwood. She looked back once. The tall man stood directly in front of her attacker now, calm and unreadable while rainwater dripped from his black sleeves onto the marble floor. One of his men quietly locked the hallway doors behind them. The last thing Isabella saw before the elevator doors closed was her attacker's face. He looked terrified, and she suddenly realized something that made her shiver, despite the warm jacket. The men who had chased her into Eclipse were predators everywhere else in the city. Politicians feared them. Business owners paid them. Police avoided them. But down here beneath the neon lights and luxury champagne, beneath the empire this stranger controlled with absolute silence, they had just become prey. The elevator doors sealed shut. The last sound she heard was a muffled scream from somewhere below. Then silence. The guard beside her pressed a button for the penthouse level. "What's his name?" Isabella whispered, her voice hoarse from running. The guard glanced at her with something like pity, or maybe warning. "Theodore Kang." "And Miss Vale?" "Yes? You just became the most protected woman in South Korea." The elevator rose through the building like ascending from hell into some unknown heaven. Isabella pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders and tried to stop shaking. She failed. She didn't know it yet, but the man who had just saved her life would change it completely. And the war that started in that basement corridor would eventually burn through Seoul's criminal underworld like fire through dry grass. But for now, she was just a terrified woman in a stranger's jacket, rising towards safety she never expected to find. Isabella woke to silk sheets and morning light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then the pain in her ribs reminded her that last night had been real. She was in Theodore Kang's penthouse, his medical suite, to be precise, a room larger than her entire apartment, with monitors beeping quietly and fresh flowers on the bedside table. Her wounds had been cleaned and bandaged. Someone had left a change of clothes folded on a chair. "Ah, you're awake." An older Korean woman entered, her gray hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried a tray with tea and what smelled like rice porridge. "I am Madame Han. I manage Mr. Kang's household. You should eat." Isabella sat up too quickly and winced. "My brother." "Protected," Madame Han said simply. "3 men are stationed at his facility in Busan. No one will approach without our knowledge." The relief hit Isabella so hard her eyes watered. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this stranger. "I need to leave. Thank you for everything, but I should go home now." "That will not be possible." The voice came from the doorway. Theodore Kang stood there, freshly showered and wearing another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray. In daylight, he looked younger than she'd expected, early 30s maybe, but his eyes carried the weight of someone much older. "Why not?" Isabella demanded, finding her courage now that she wasn't bleeding and terrified. Theodore stepped in the room. Madame Han discreetly withdrew. "Because Min Jae-hyun's men already visited your apartment last night. They searched it. They are still watching the building." He paused, letting that sink in. "You cannot go home." Isabella's hands started shaking again. She clasped them together in her lap. "Who are you? Really? A ghost of something?" Not quite a smile crossed his face. "I am the man who owns this building and several others. Hotels, shipping routes, private security networks." He sat in the chair beside her bed, moving with the economical grace of someone who had trained his body for violence. "I am also the man who will keep you alive if you let me." "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Theodore studied her for a long moment. "I know you've worked at Eclipse for 14 months. I know you send 70% of your salary to your brother's rehabilitation center. I know you've never once complained about the guests who treat you poorly." He tilted his head slightly. "I also know you witnessed something 3 weeks ago that you should not have seen." Her blood ran cold. "You knew? I know everything that happens under my roof. I told you this. Then why didn't you stop them?" Why didn't you? Because I didn't know they would hurt you. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Regret, maybe, or guilt. I assumed Min was simply paranoid. I increased security on the upper levels. I didn't realize he would. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That was my failure. Isabella didn't know what to say. She had spent years believing powerful men were all the same, selfish, cruel, indifferent to people like her. But Theodore Kang was apologizing. Actually apologizing. What did you do to them? She asked quietly. The men who chased me. Theodore's expression didn't change. They will not bother you again. The way he said it made her certain they would never bother anyone again. Your brother, Theodore continued, seamlessly shifting topics, has made remarkable progress in his rehabilitation. The facility reports he has begun speaking more in recent weeks. His physical therapy is going well. Isabella stared at him. How do you know all this? I made calls while you slept. You've been unconscious for 14 hours. 14 hours. She'd lost half a day. I need to call Noah. He'll be worried. Your phone was broken during the chase. I've replaced it. He produced a new phone from his jacket pocket, already set up and charged. His number is programmed. You can call him whenever you wish. Isabella took the phone with trembling fingers. It was the latest model, easily worth a month of her salary. I don't want charity. It's protection. There's a difference. Theodore stood, smoothing his jacket. Min Jae-hyun has powerful allies. He will not stop looking for you. Until this situation is resolved, you and your brother remain under my protection, whether you want it or not. He walked toward the door, then paused. Rest today. Tomorrow we'll discuss what you witnessed. The information you have could be very valuable. Valuable to who? To everyone who wants to see men like Min Jae-hyun destroyed. He looked back at her, and for just a moment his mask slipped. Underneath was something raw and old. I have been waiting a long time for someone like you, Miss Vale. Someone who saw too much and survived. Then he was gone, leaving Isabella alone with new clothes, a new phone, and the unsettling realization that her life had changed permanently. She called Noah first. His voice, hesitant but present, brought tears she could no longer hold back. I'm okay, she told him, wiping her cheeks. I'm safe. Someone is helping us. Who? Noah asked, his words slow but clear. Isabella looked at the closed door, at the luxurious room, at the phone in her hand. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I think he might be the most dangerous man in Seoul. 3 weeks before the chase, Isabella had walked into room 7, carrying a whiskey tray, and walked out carrying a death sentence. The restricted rooms at Club Eclipse were reserved for VIPs who demanded absolute privacy. No cameras, no windows, soundproofed walls. Politicians, businessmen, criminals. They all mingled here because Eclipse was neutral territory, and Theodore Kang's neutrality was enforced with iron consequences. Isabella had only entered because the regular server called in sick. She'd knocked twice, received no answer, and used her master keycard assuming the room was empty. It wasn't. The city councilman was on his knees beside an open suitcase filled with cash. Stacks of American dollars, more money than Isabella had ever seen in one place. A man she recognized as Min Jae-hyun stood over him, phone raised, recording everything, and between them, spread across the table, were photographs, women. Young women, some barely out of their teens, passport photos, like a catalog. Isabella froze. The councilman looked up. Min turned. She lowered her eyes immediately. Apologies. Wrong room. She backed out, closed the door, and walked calmly to the service elevator. Only when the doors closed did she allow herself to shake. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd seen nothing, understood nothing. She was nobody. But powerful men don't believe in nobodies who see things. Now sitting in Theodore's private study 2 floors above Eclipse, Isabella told him everything. The cash, the recording, the photographs. Theodore listened without interrupting, his hands folded on his desk. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. The photographs, he finally said. Did you recognize any of the women? No. I barely glanced at them, but you're certain they were young? Yes, some looked like teenagers. She swallowed hard. I think they were trafficking victims. Theodore's expression didn't change, but something in the room shifted. The air felt heavier. His bodyguard, a broad-shouldered man named Kang Dae-min, who had been standing silently by the door, shifted his weight like he was preparing for a fight. That complicates things, Theodore said quietly. Min Jae-hyun is not merely corrupt. He is supplying young women to government officials, blackmail material, leverage. He stood and walked to the window looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. And he is not working alone. My sources indicate he has partnered with the Shim syndicate. They control the ports in Incheon, trafficking routes. Isabella felt sick. I just wanted to serve drinks and send money to my brother. I didn't ask for any of this. No one ever does. Theodore turned back to her. Kang Damon will be your personal security from now on. He is my most trusted man. You will not go anywhere without him. I don't need a babysitter. You need a bodyguard. The difference is that one changes diapers and the other stops bullets. Theodore's voice left no room for argument. This is not negotiable. Kang Damon stepped forward and gave a slight bow. He was perhaps 35, with a scar across his left eyebrow and hands that looked capable of crushing bricks. I will keep you safe, Miss Vale. Isabella wanted to protest, but the memory of hands grabbing her, tearing her blouse, pinning her down, it silenced her. She nodded reluctantly. Over the next few days, she learned what it meant to be under Theodore Kang's protection. Damon accompanied her everywhere, silent and watchful. She noticed small things. How Theodore remembered she drank her coffee black. How he'd replaced her broken phone with one that had Noah's favorite games pre-installed. How food appeared at Noah's facility from anonymous donors that she knew weren't anonymous at all. She also noticed the shadows under Theodore's eyes, the way he sometimes stared at nothing, the tension that never fully left his shoulders. Does he ever sleep? She asked Dapin one evening. The bodyguard hesitated. Not well, not for many years. Why, that is not my story to tell. But Isabella was starting to piece things together from overheard conversations and careful questions. Theodore Kang had been 15 when his father was murdered by rival gang members. His mother disappeared shortly after. By 18, he had taken control of his father's operations. By 25, he had built an empire. Everyone in Seoul feared him, respected him, but nobody seemed to love him. On the 5th day, Theodore summoned her to his study with grim news. Someone has leaked my private movements online, locations, schedules, information only my inner circle possesses. He paused. There is a traitor in my organization. Isabella felt her stomach drop. Someone close to you. Yes, Theodore's voice was calm, but his eyes were dangerous. Which means the safe house I planned to move you to is no longer safe. I need somewhere else. Somewhere only I know about. Where? He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. I have a property near Busan on the coast, very private. Your brother could join us there. Join us. I will be coming with you. Until I find the traitor, I trust no one else with your protection. The words should have frightened her. Instead, they made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Important. The estate sat on a cliff overlooking the East Sea, a sprawling traditional meets modern compound surrounded by stone walls and dense pine forest. The nearest town was 30 minutes away. The nearest neighbor 40. It was the kind of place where the world fell away, and only the sound of waves remained. Isabella stood on the wooden deck, watching the ocean churn gray and silver under overcast skies, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this safe. 3 days had passed since their arrival. True to his word, Theodore had arranged for Noah to be transported from his facility in Busan. Her brother now occupied a ground-floor suite modified for wheelchair accessibility, complete with a view of the garden, and all the equipment his physical therapy required. He's terrified of me, Theodore said, appearing beside her on the deck. Isabella glanced at him. Noah's been through a lot. He doesn't trust easily. Neither do I. We have that in common. She'd noticed Theodore's awkward attempts to interact with Noah over the past few days. He didn't know how to talk to a 19-year-old in a wheelchair who communicated mostly through nods and brief phrases. But he kept trying. He'd brought chessboards and art supplies. He'd sat silently in the same room while Noah sketched, not demanding conversation. Just present. You lost someone, Isabella said. It wasn't a question. Theodore was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer then. My father was shot in front of me when I was 15. They made me watch. My mother disappeared 3 weeks later. I still don't know if she left or was taken. His voice was flat, but Isabella heard the old pain underneath, the kind that never fully healed. I'm sorry. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you to understand. He turned to face her, dark eyes intense. I know what it is to have violence take everything from you. I will not let that happen to your brother. To you. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She wandered the house and found Theodore in the kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at a cup of cold tea. Insomnia? She asked. Nightmares. She sat across from him. What do you dream about? The people I couldn't save. The people I hurt. Sometimes I can't tell them apart anymore. He looked at her, and in the dim kitchen light he seemed younger, more human, less like the terrifying figure from the basement corridor. Do you want to know something strange? Since you arrived, the nightmares have been less frequent. Isabella didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They sat in silence until dawn crept through the windows, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The days settled into a rhythm. Breakfast together. Noah's therapy sessions. Theodore teaching her brother chess with infinite patience. Evening walks along the cliff path. Isabella caught Theodore standing outside Noah's room one night, just listening, making sure her brother was safe. What are you doing? She whispered. Theodore looked almost embarrassed. Making sure he's breathing. You do this every night. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. A week into their stay, Theodore returned from a perimeter check with blood soaking through his sleeve. A knife wound, he said dismissively. Training accident with Min. But Isabella saw the tightness around his eyes and insisted on tending to it. In the bathroom, she cleaned the wound carefully, her fingers gentle against his arm. He sat perfectly still, watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I want to. Their eyes met. Theodore lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek, feather-light. His expression was unreadable, but his touch was tender. We should, he started. Sir. Damon appeared in the doorway, face grim. Security cameras detected vehicles approaching from the south road, 6 of them. Heavily armed. Theodore was on his feet instantly, the gentle man from moments before replaced by the cold-eyed predator. Get Noah to the panic room now. Isabella's blood turned to ice. They found us? Yes, Theodore checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. But they made a mistake coming here. What mistake? He looked at her, and for a moment she saw the boy who had watched his father die, the teenager who had built an empire on blood and vengeance. This is my home, and I protect what's mine. The first shots shattered the kitchen window at 11:47 p.m. Isabella was already running, pushing Noah's wheelchair toward the reinforced panic room, hidden behind the library's false wall. Her brother's face was pale, his hands gripping the armrests so hard his knuckles were white. It's okay, she gasped, though nothing was okay. We're going to be safe. Theodore will. An explosion rocked the house. Somewhere glass shattered. She got Noah inside the panic room and sealed the door, then pressed the intercom. Theodore, static. Then his voice eerily calm. Stay there. Not open the door for anyone but me. The intercom went dead. For 17 minutes, Isabella sat in the soundproofed room with her brother, listening to the muffled thunder of gunfire and trying not to imagine what was happening outside. Noah had begun to tremble violently, his eyes unfocused. Trauma flashback from the construction accident, she realized with horror. Noah, look at me. You're safe. I'm here. She grabbed his hands and pressing them against her face. Feel that? I'm real. We're together. His breathing slowed marginally. His eyes found hers. Scared, he whispered. Me too. But Theodore is out there. He won't let anything happen to us.
The gunfire stopped.
Silence stretched for an agonizing minute, then 2 minutes. Then heavy footsteps approached the panic room door, in a knock pattern they'd established days ago. Isabella opened the door. Theodore stood in the hallway. Blood splattered across his white shirt and dripping from a gash above his eyebrow. Behind him, Min and 2 other guards were securing zip ties around captured attackers. It's over, Theodore said. His voice was hoarse. They're dealt with. Are you hurt? Minor injuries. But Noah. Isabella turned. Her brother was staring at Theodore with wide eyes, taking in the blood and the cold efficiency still radiating from him. She expected fear. Instead, Noah raised one trembling hand and pointed at Theodore's sleeve. You're bleeding, Noah said. A full sentence, clear and steady. Theodore looked down at the red stain spreading across his forearm. The knife wound from earlier reopened. It's nothing. You protected us, Noah said. Another full sentence. Something shifted in Theodore's expression. The predator melted away, replaced by raw, unguarded emotion. Yes, I did. Noah nodded slowly, then reached for his sketch pad. While the guards secured the house and Isabella fetched medical supplies, he began drawing. Theodore sat down heavily on the floor, his back against the panic room wall. When Isabella returned with bandages, he didn't protest as she cleaned his wounds. His hands were trembling slightly. Adrenaline crash. You fought them yourself, she said quietly. They were in my house, near your brother, near you. His jaw tightened. I don't delegate that. How many? 12 attackers. We captured 4 alive. They'll be questioned. Isabella finished bandaging his arm and sat beside him on the floor. They were shoulder to shoulder, covered in blood and sweat, and the lingering terror of almost losing everything. Thank you, she whispered. Theodore turned his head to look at her. You don't need to thank me, I told you. I protect what's mine. There was something different in the way he said mine this time, something that made her breath catch. Before she could respond, Noah made a sound. They both turned. He was holding up his sketch pad. The drawing showed 3 figures standing in front of a house by the sea. A woman with curly hair, Isabella, a young man in a wheelchair, Noah, and a tall figure in black standing between them in the darkness facing outward, protecting them. At the bottom, in Noah's careful handwriting, were 2 words, our family. Theodore stared at the drawing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than Isabella had ever heard it. Your brother is an artist. He drew you as part of our family, Isabella said softly. Yes. Theodore swallowed hard. I noticed. Later that night, after the attackers had been removed and the house secured, Isabella found Theodore standing outside Noah's room. But this time, he wasn't just listening. He had opened the door a crack and was watching her brother sleep, the drawing clutched carefully in his hands. He didn't notice Isabella watching him from the hallway. She didn't tell him she'd seen the tears on his cheeks. The captured attackers talked. It took Min less than 6 hours to extract the information Theodore needed. The traitor was someone Isabella had never met, a logistics coordinator named Park, who had been feeding information to Min Jae-hyun for months in exchange for gambling debts. Theodore dealt with Park personally. Isabella didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. What she did learn in the quiet days following the attack was the full truth about Theodore Kang's past. He told her himself, sitting on the deck while the sunset painted the ocean orange and gold. I was 15 when my father died. He wasn't a good man. He ran gambling operations, protection rackets, the usual organized crime portfolio. But he was my father, and he loved me. Isabella sat beside him saying nothing, letting him speak. They showed him in our living room, made me watch. Then they told me I had a choice, join their syndicate or die with him. Theodore's voice was flat, reciting facts rather than reliving trauma. I joined. I learned their operations. I learned to fight, to kill, to negotiate. By 18, I was running my own crew. By 22, I had eliminated the men who murdered my father and taken control of everything they owned. That's when you built Eclipse. That's when I became what I am. He looked at his hands as if seeing blood on them. I wanted to build something legitimate. Hotels, restaurants, shipping, real businesses. But the underworld doesn't let you leave. You can only go deeper or die. Isabella touched his arm gently. You saved us. You're not a monster. The things I've done. The things you've done made you who you are. And who you are saved my brother's life. Saved mine. She met his eyes steadily. You're not defined by the violence you survived. You're defined by what you choose to do with the power you have now. Theodore stared at her. What do you think I should choose? Whatever gives you peace. He laughed bitterly. I don't know what peace feels like. Then maybe it's time to find out. Something shifted between them in that moment. The distance that had always existed, boss and protected witness, dangerous man and ordinary woman, began to dissolve. Theodore started spending more time with Noah. Chess games became daily rituals. He learned the names of Noah's physical therapists, memorized his medication schedule, and never once made her brother feel like a burden. Isabella watched Theodore read to Noah one evening, his deep voice stumbling over the Korean words in a children's book, and felt her heart crack open in ways she hadn't allowed since her parents died. "You're falling in love with him," Damien observed one afternoon. Isabella startled. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" The bodyguard's scarred face was unreadable. "I've worked for him for 12 years. I've never seen him like this. He sleeps now. He smiles occasionally. Yesterday he laughed at something your brother drew." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're good for him, both of you. Don't let fear stop you from seeing what's right in front of you." That night, Theodore found her on the deck watching the stars. He stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. "Min escaped custody," he said quietly. "The police were transporting him to a higher security facility. His men intercepted the convoy." Isabella's blood ran cold. "He's free?" "Not for long, but he's desperate now. He knows I have evidence of the trafficking operation. He'll come for turn to face her. I need to end this for good." "How?" "I'm going to war, and I need you to stay here where it's safe." "You want to leave us behind?" "I want to protect you." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't lose you, Isabella, either of you. You're the first good thing that's happened to me in 20 years. She reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a starving man offered bread. "Then don't lose us," she said. "Come back." "I will. Promise me." He opened his eyes. "I promise." And then, as naturally as breathing, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost questioning. Then deeper, more urgent. Two people who had been dancing around each other finally admitting what they both already knew. When they broke apart, Theodore pressed his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he said, "I want to be someone who deserves you." "You already are," Isabella whispered. "You just don't see it yet." Seoul erupted into chaos over the next 2 weeks. Theodore launched systematic attacks against Min's network with surgical precision. Shipping containers seized at Incheon, safe houses raided, bank accounts frozen, politicians exposed. The newspapers called it a gang war, but Isabella knew better. This was a man dismantling an empire piece by piece to protect what he loved. She stayed at the coastal estate with Noah, following the news with her heart in her throat. Theodore called every night. His voice grew more exhausted with each conversation, more distant. The gentle man who had kissed her under the stars was being consumed by the ruthless boss Seoul feared. "You're losing yourself," she told him on the 10th night. "The job isn't finished. The job doesn't matter if there's nothing left of you when it's done." Silence on the line. Then, "I don't know how to be anything else. Come home, even for a day. Let me remind you." He came the next morning, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Isabella didn't say anything. She just took his hand and led him to Noah's room, where her brother was working on a new drawing. "Young," Noah said, looking up with a smile. The Korean word for older brother, the first time Noah had used it for Theodore. Theodore's composure cracked. He knelt beside Noah's wheelchair and looked at the drawing. The same scene of their house by the sea, but this time with more detail. Flowers in the garden, a dog on the porch, 3 figures holding hands. "Is this how you see us?" Theodore asked. Noah nodded. "Family." Theodore bowed his head. His shoulders shook once, then stilled. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, but his expression was determined. "When this is over," he said, "I'm going to tear down half of what I built. The illegal operations, the protection rackets, the bribes. I'm going to become someone you can be proud of." "We're already proud of you," Isabella said from the doorway. He looked at her. "How can you be? You've seen what I am. I've seen a man who saved a stranger, who protects my brother like his own blood, who reads children's books and teaches chess and stands guard outside our rooms at night." She crossed to him and knelt beside him. "The monster they created isn't who you are. It's who you survived." Theodore kissed her then in front of Noah, who made a face but was smiling. The peace lasted 3 hours. Damon's call came at sunset. Min had kidnapped one of Theodore's senior lieutenants, a man who had been with him since the beginning. The message was brutal, a video of the man beaten and bleeding, with coordinates for an abandoned warehouse in Seoul. "He wants to trade," Damon reported. "You for the lieutenant, absolute not," Isabella said immediately. "It's a trap," Theodore agreed. "But if I don't go, he'll kill my man and come here next. I won't let this violence touch you again. Then we end it together. Isabella, I'm not asking permission." Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. "I'm the witness. I'm the one he's afraid of. If we're going to destroy him, I need to be there. Theodore argued for an hour. She didn't budge. Finally, with a mixture of frustration and admiration, he relented. You stay behind me at all times. You do exactly what I say when I say it. And if anything goes wrong, you run. Promise me. I promise. They left Noah with a full security detail and drove through the night toward Seoul. The city lights glittered on the horizon like a promise or a warning. Theodore held her hand the entire drive. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said quietly, I need you to know something. What? Before you, I didn't care if I lived or died. My empire was all I had and I hated it. Hated myself. You gave me something to want beyond revenge. You and Noah, you gave me a future. Isabella squeezed his hand. Then come back to that future. Both of us. The warehouse district rose ahead, dark and silent. Somewhere inside, Min Jae-yoon was waiting. The warehouse was a trap, but Theodore had expected that. What he hadn't expected was the scale. Min had hired mercenaries, former military, heavily armed, desperate men with nothing to lose. They attacked from multiple angles the moment Theodore's convoy entered the compound. Gunfire erupted in the darkness. Isabella stayed low in the armored vehicle as Theodore's men engaged. Through the window, she saw muzzle flashes and falling bodies and Theodore moving through the chaos like death itself. Precise and unstoppable. But the trap wasn't at the warehouse. It was at Eclipse. Min's real target was the club, where a charity gala was underway with 300 guests, including politicians, celebrities, and foreign diplomats. While Theodore was distracted at the warehouse, Min's remaining forces stormed Eclipse and took hostages. The coward Daemin snarled when the news came through. He's forcing us to choose. Save your people or catch him. Theodore didn't hesitate. We do both. Daemin, take half our forces to Eclipse. I'll deal with Min. Sir, that's an order. Isabella grabbed his arm. I'm coming with you. Isabella, you promised I'd be there when we end this. I'm holding you to that. Theodore looked like he wanted to argue. Then something in his expression shifted. Stay close, stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, I know run. They tracked Min to a shipyard on the Han River, where a cargo vessel was preparing to depart. Trafficking victims were being loaded onto the ship, young women terrified and crying. Min was fleeing the country, and he was taking his merchandise with him. This ends now, Theodore said. He turned to Isabella. There's a Coast Guard station half a mile downriver. Take my phone, evidence of everything is on it. Get it to them. They'll raid the ship. What about you? I'm going to buy you time. No, we do this together. Isabella. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you. I should have said it before. I love you, and I love Noah, and I want that future we talked about. But I need to know you're safe, please. Let me do this. Tears streamed down her face. I love you too. Don't you dare die. I won't, I promised, remember? She ran. Behind her, gunfire erupted as Theodore engaged Min's remaining guards. She didn't look back. She couldn't, or she'd never be able to leave. The Coast Guard mobilized within minutes. SWAT teams descended on the shipyard. The trafficking victims were rescued. The ship was seized. But when Isabella ran back toward the warehouse where she'd last seen Theodore, the gunfire had stopped. She found him on the dock, leaning against a shipping container. His white shirt was crimson. Min lay motionless nearby. Theodore! She fell to her knees beside him. No, he's done, Theodore said, his voice barely a whisper. The evidence? The trafficking. It's all over. Stay with me. Stay awake. Help is coming. Worth it. He smiled weakly, blood on his lips. You were worth it. Don't talk like you're dying. You promised me. You promised. His eyes were closing. Tell him I was proud to be his young. Theodore, stay awake, Theodore! His hand found hers, squeezed once, then went limp. Isabella screamed for help into the darkness, holding the most dangerous man in Seoul in her arms. Begging him not to leave her, Theodore survived. It was close. The surgeon said another 10 minutes and he would have bled out. But he survived because Isabella had refused to let him go, had pressed her hands against his wounds and screamed until her voice gave out and the paramedics finally arrived. He woke 3 days later in a private hospital room. Isabella was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hand still holding his. Hey, he croaked. Her eyes flew open. Hey yourself, you look. She laughed through tears. You look worse. The recovery was slow. 2 surgeries, physical therapy. Weeks of rest at the coastal estate while Day Min managed the dismantling of Theodore's criminal operations. The evidence Isabella had delivered to the Coast Guard exposed the trafficking network. Arrests followed, politicians resigned, Min Jae-hyun's empire crumbled, but so did Theodore's by choice. "I'm done," he told Isabella one evening, sitting on the deck watching the sunset. "The illegal operations are shutting down. The legitimate businesses will continue. Eclipse, the hotels, the shipping company. But I'm stepping back, letting others run things." "What will you do instead?" He looked at her. "Whatever you and Noah want," I was thinking. "Maybe we could travel, see places that aren't soaked in blood and bad memories. Noah's never been to Jeju Island. I hear it's beautiful." Isabella leaned against his shoulder. "He'd like that. Also," Theodore hesitated, something she'd never seen him do. "I bought this house, the estate. It's in your name and Noah's, so you'll always have somewhere safe, no matter what happens. Theodore, I'm not trying to buy you. I wanted to give you a home. The kind of home I never had." He swallowed hard. "If you want it," Isabella kissed him softly. "I want it. I want you. I want this. All of it." 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, stood at Noah's school event, a public exhibition of student artwork. Noah had been attending a specialized program for young adults with disabilities, and his progress had been remarkable. He spoke in full sentences now. He laughed easily. He had friends. His featured piece was the drawing he'd been working on for months. It showed a house by the sea, with 3 figures on the porch: a woman with curly hair, a young man in a wheelchair, a tall man in black facing the ocean, finally at peace. Underneath, in careful handwriting, were the words, "This is our home." Theodore stood in front of that drawing for a long time, his hand in Isabella's, his eyes wet. "Your brother," she said quietly, "is determined to make me cry at every opportunity. He says it's good for you, emotional release." Theodore turned to her. "There's something I want to ask you." "What?" "I've been practicing in Korean for weeks." He took a deep breath, and Isabella realized with astonishment that Theodore Kang, the most feared man in Seoul, the Mafia boss who had destroyed empires and survived assassination attempts, was nervous. "Ne giot iseojwo," he said carefully. "Stay with me, not because you need protection, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay." Theodore pulled her close. Around them, students and parents and teachers moved through the exhibition, unaware that they were witnessing the final chapter of a story that had started with terror and ended with love. Noah wheeled up to them, grinning. "Did she say yes?" She said yes. "Good. I already drew the wedding picture." Noah held up a new sketch. The same house, but this time the woman was wearing a white dress and the tall man was smiling. Theodore Kang, who had once ordered, "Bring her to me," in a basement corridor, now only asked softly, "Stay." And she did. The most feared man in Seoul once commanded armies and destroyed empires. But in the end he found redemption not in power, but in a seaside home, a woman who saw past his darkness, and a boy who drew pictures of their family. This is our home, and it was. If this story touched your heart, drop a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that even the darkest past can lead to a beautiful future. Subscribe and turn on notifications because more stories like this are coming your way. Thank you for staying until the very end. See you in the next one.